Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited. My name is Yvonne Shirley, and I'm a filmmaker and Newark resident and co-founder of the Newarkive. The Newarkive is a media initiative, multimedia initiative created by myself and my partner, LeRon here, to really collect stories and images of Newarkers by Newarkers, and to share the stories of our memories and beliefs and dreams with each other. So we're very excited to be in partnership with the Newark Museum of Art to bring you all a series of films this fall. And this series we've called Stories of Us, mainly because we looked for films that told stories by filmmakers that had personal relationships with those stories, and oftentimes the spaces and places that they were exploring in their work were places that they themselves called home. So with that, I will pass it to my partner, LeRon to get into tonight's conversation.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And here's where we get into the compliments, and I'm sorry. Filmmakers in advance because I am a fan of everybody on this call, of course, and that's why we're here. So we are joined with filmmakers Faren and Terrance Daye. Faren with the film Liberty and Terrance Daye with the film Ship, a visual poem. And if you haven't gotten a chance to see the films, they are available until Sunday. And for the people viewing on Facebook, you can sign up on Eventbrite to receive the links, and we'll post the link in the comments below. All right. So like Yvonne said, that this is the Stories of Us, and we've watched your films, and we really felt that your films were kindred to the stories that we experienced here in Newark. And I just wanted to, for you to talk a little bit about your relationship to your film. And we'll start with you, Faren. Can't hear you.
Thank you all for having us. I am excited about being in convo with y'all. Dang, you really threw me in there, LeRon. What was the question? Why? What's my relationship to this?
Yeah. I want
to the story.
To the story. Liberty is set in Miami. It's set in Liberty City, Miami. And it is set in Liberty Square in Liberty City, Miami. It's the oldest public housing site in Miami. It's the oldest and largest public housing site now in the U.S. period. And Liberty, it is, because it is the largest, it is hard to not be connected to Liberty Square. I think that's the best way that I can answer that question. It's like if you are not related to someone who has lived in Liberty Square, you certainly know someone. You've been there. Like it's a very well-known public housing site. I felt compelled to tell its story when tell a story based in Liberty Square when I found out that the city was tearing it down, and they were tearing it down in phases. I don't even know if I would have told the story if they would have torn it down in one fell swoop, but particularly because they explicitly said that they were not moving the residents, that this revitalization project would be one where residents would stay and they would be phased out. And for me, that's where I was just like suspicious. Like, what? They don't care about us. So this is not ringing up. It's not adding up the way I want. The way in a way that seemed truthful. So, I just started asking questions, and a lot of the residents didn't have what I felt were questions that that they needed to know, that the public needed to know. So like, when would they be moved? Were they guaranteed a place back? And when would that be? How long is this process? None of these questions, or I wasn't able to get any direct answers from residents. And it's not that they weren't asking the questions, it was the process was really murky and just like botched in many ways. So so this, it wasn't, I just felt like all of those factors made me very suspicious about the project. And I felt that it was the demise of Liberty Square in many ways. And that feeling like it was an inevitable demise is what sort of made it seem like urgent to me to start documenting in some ways. I say documenting, but documenting in this narrative sense through a story that's looking at the bonds, because that's what strikes me most about Liberty City. It truly is a network. It's a close-knit community. Everyone knows each other. It's just like a small town. And that wasn't getting addressed in the media as well. So this was a counter notion in many ways.
Thank you, Terrance.
Yeah, I was like, I want to jump.
We'll get back to that. We're going to definitely get back to that.
I love that you said documentation, because when I first was watching Liberty, like I thought it was a documentary. Like for a second, I had to like go back and was like, wait, this is narrative. But I love that. I think that documentation is extremely important, as well as, you know, the question asking that you sort of brought up, right? Like what is really happening here, and this sort of gradual change that's chipping away. And, you know, funny enough, I think we're interested in similar things. I'm a poet and a filmmaker from Long Island, New York, for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, hey. And a lot of the work that I do reimagines Black male identity and destigmatizes mental health within communities of color. For this particular film, I was super fascinated with ideas of home, and specifically tradition and silence. And I, you know, I drew a lot of, I guess a lot of life, like real lived experiences from childhood, from the family reunions we used to have, and this like presiding question of what do we pass down to younger generations. And for me, as someone who grew up in a conservative Christian household, but identified as queer, had a father who is a pastor, you know, there's a lot of things that I wrestle to this day, continue to wrestle with, especially regarding sexuality, but regarding the sort of quiet as it's kept nature that I grew up in, and you know, that my cousins grew up in. And I think that it didn't lend itself to much dialogue and conversations around things that really mattered, right? So you were sort of afraid to ask questions because every question sort of implied a, you know, it is, you know, sort of the life and death lies in the power of the tongue. So you don't even question certain things, because to say it out loud, to give it life, you know, is to sort of almost, you know, damn yourself. And so I struggled even to ask myself questions about myself. And as I got older, I started to realize how that really just led the direct line to things like depression, to things like not seeing value in myself, or struggling to find the value in myself, which was only sort of reaffirmed through the images and the daily media sort of cycle that was happening externally. So I was really looking at the insular home, but also how what we are taught in the house, especially thinking about young men of color, and then the images that you go out into the real world and see that either refute or confirm those sort of internal feelings that you're thinking. So hyphenship really comes out of that space, and sort of developed from there. But the question asking and the documenting, I think is such a real big kind of big point to kind of peel back some of those layers. There's so much we don't talk about, and I think there's so many consequences as a result of that we don't even think about on a real intimate insular level.
I love that you talked about the things that are unspoken, and that's the thing that we see in our families, and a lot of our families, in the Black families, and Black communities, and you know, that's one of the things that the Newarkive is birthed in. And I come from a family where I can say I don't know everything about it because some things are just unspoken.
Yeah.
And in the film, and there's another film that we're showing for the people that don't know called Suzanne, that deals with the aftermath of death and this family that's just speaking about something so forward. And it's not something that, it was so different for me to see for a family to speak about something so forward. And it probably wouldn't have happened if this film wasn't made and putting these two characters in front of each other to talk about this, And one thing I see in both of your films is you have these characters that have an elephant in the room. And there are so many scenes where we have these two characters where nobody's speaking, but the conversation is so loud. And can you speak, both of you, can you speak to conveying that on camera and conveying that on film so clearly? Or the process of doing so?
I'll let you take it, Faren. I'll hop after.
Well, I'm still processing, and as you were talking, LeRon, I was trying to think about both of our films and the moments where that takes place, and like why that coincidence even is. I'm trying to process that. I mean, all of these characters both of these stories are just like it's like, yes, you're right. The silence, there's an elephant in the room, and it seems to be just too much to confront for some reason. And it either is understood, so it doesn't have to be, or it's understood and still not confronted and, bubbles up over in violent ways. But it's still there and it's still palpable. And I think that's what you were speaking to about, Terrance, about it. The silence can disrupt on a cellular level, affect us on a cellular level.
Hey.
How did I deal with it, or how did that come about? I don't know. I believe in feelings more than I believe in words.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
That's how I got myself, and as I practice that more, I see it's showing up more in the work. I don't. And there's. I also feel like that's important to show as well. Like we can communicate and understand each other by being together. Like the primacy of the body is that's just like, that's everything. So that's my answer, I guess.
I'll hop in because I love that. I think, for me, and I'll just say this, like I love being able to like have spaces like this where you can talk about the work after, because I always say that I make the work because I don't have the words, but like the means is to get to this point to actually talk about it, because I don't know, I don't have the answers, but like the hope is that like in talking and having shown you, right, that we can generate the language together. And I think for me, coming from, like I said, a background in poetry where words are, everything is in the economy of words, and kind of succinctly capturing feeling and idea. There were times where I would find myself trying to articulate an emotion that I just did not have words for, especially because I hadn't exercised, that muscle of even, deciphering how do I say this? How do I say this? And it was frustrating, and it was causing so much to kind of, again, just stay withheld, to stay inside. And when I found visual storytelling, what really attracted me to it was that suddenly I had the tools to express myself without needing the words all the time. And something that I was watching in Liberty, just a scene that really stuck out to me is there's this editing moment where we're sort of on we're kind of at the apartment or on a complex, and you sort of cut in these young women, but they seem like phantoms at times, and they're dancing. It's like, again, that was a moment that I felt like there are no words, nothing is happening, but you're saying so much, like so much is happening. There's tension, there's conflict, there's resistance. There was something really beautiful about that. And I think that's that sort of I found so much voice in visual storytelling, and so many of my earlier works tended to be so quiet and sort of be in that space of silence, because I think sometimes we need to stay there a little bit longer. Ironically, silence is the very thing that we need to break, but I think especially when you're telling stories of marginalized bodies and communities, it's like, well, this is the space that we're often stuck in or trying to get out of and break out of, and so we have to start here. And Hyphen Ship was the first time for me bringing narrative in, because obviously that lends itself to a more experimental kind of storytelling approach, and Hyphen Ship was my first time trying to figure out how do I bring a narrative into this, and so it became a real question about trying to look back through my life and find those quiet moments that still articulate everything. They're just charged and they articulate everything that I have to say, without needing the characters to say much, right? Or what they're saying isn't necessarily the important thing. It's like what's happening, and seeing a young boy, seeing himself for the first time, or like seeing himself in imagery and in language that we understand has a historical context, but his innocent mind is looking at it and says, I see another Black man that looks like me and has a do-rag, and the implications of that, and how that soaks into the imagination, and it impacts it in a myriad of ways that I don't think we even, we don't talk about. And so it's exciting to figure out how do you show that to an audience, and then how do we just begin to generate the very dialogue that we don't have, which allows so much of this to exist and persist.
I mean, I was wondering too, like just while we're on the subject of process, the way you guys describe your rich relationship to the subject matter, just how that impacted and informed your creative process, your choices, both behind and in front of the camera. And I know for LeRon and I, that's one of the ideas behind the Newarkive, is that these are images that are created by us, that are of us. And I know that both of you clearly have made very deliberate choices in your work. And like Faren, I know some behind the scenes of your process, so I would love for you to speak on that. And also like Terrance, the way that you even integrate this archival moment at the beginning, like just into this narrative structure, but the way that you, as soon as we see this image, it's so anchoring, because I mean, when I saw it, I'm like, I know this boy that I'm looking at, and then you take us, somewhere else. But yeah, I'm wondering if you guys can just speak on how your rich relationship to the subject, to the stories, informed the choices that you all made in the process of making.
I'm gonna have to bite on that a little more.
Take all the time.
Maybe I'm like having a difficult time with the question. My relationship to the story informing the process. Yeah, I'm gonna think on that a little more, if that's okay.
If you want me to jump in, Faren, feel free to like hop into at any time. But I think for me, process stems back to the why, like the audience, and again, what are we doing this for? Why are we telling the story? And for me, it always starts with audience, like people of color. Like I'm always speaking to a Black audience, but more specifically, for this story, I knew that there were certain things that I needed to be real, like the blood on the wall, right? Like that was a hard imagery for me to grapple with, because in this story, what I'm talking about, we have the situation of a young boy who's committed suicide essentially because of his queerness, right? It's implied, but that is what is happening. And I think that's a reality that we don't often sit with sometimes. That is like that happens, and more specifically that these are consequences of the things that don't get said, right? That there are consequences to the silence. And that was, that again, that's something that has connection to my own personal life and the history of, depression and struggles of mental health related to my sexuality, but also the need then, if that's the imagery that I know I'm taking this audience through, right? Imagery that is painful, imagery that especially for other people who are queer or who have just considered suicide, like that's hard, dense imagery, and I'm always careful and sensitive to how we engage audiences' imagination as storytellers and content creators, especially for Black people and minds who are bombarded constantly with just horrible, violent, negative imagery. And so I knew that I wanted to start off that at the very beginning. I think even in the script, it was like, it has to start off like this, and that love needed to be in the space. I needed audiences to know that there was care here and love here and God was in the room. And so I was just thinking a lot about how to do that. We had a different idea that we didn't get to shoot. And so in the editing room, it kind of fell to having to figure out how to start the story, because I knew I didn't want it to start off simply with that slap. That's sort of a homage to Killer Sheep, but that's how the archival footage got in there. Again, that goes back to personal, but also I've been familiar with that footage and always felt like I wanted to use it somewhere. And in my family reunions, in our tradition, my cousin used to always sing His Eyes on the Sparrow. And that cousin was somebody who I shared, we both struggled with our sexuality growing up, and both had experiences with early exposure to pornography that caused us to relate to one another, in a specific way, and, playing house, but also, what I mean? Like doing things that at the time we didn't realize or we knew were wrong, but didn't realize, didn't realize the sort of implications and bearings that would have on us. So there was like real personal significance to using that archival footage, and then moving forward through imagery, through the editing and the sound, and the use of quotes, right? Like figuring out like, okay, like if I'm using narrative, right? But narrative is in itself another tool. I'm not telling the story just to say, hey, this happened, and hey, these are look how crazy this is or exceptional this is, which I think is often what I don't find as productive about narrative work. Is it's sort of like there's an end, there's something happy that happens, but I think, how do I take narrative and make it useful for the audience, for what I know they need, for our healing, right? And as I mentioned, with telling stories that don't often get told, marginalized stories, whatever you want to call it, you often have to do that work as a storyteller, because westernized stories aren't always built in a structured in a way and in a container that allows us to get at what we need. You know what I mean? To get at the healing and the nuance and the saying multiple things at once. It's just kind of like it doesn't get there. And so you have to kind of do all this tailoring, cutting, moving, switching, because it's like there's a feeling, right? It's this, but it's also this, and it's that, but you gotta, and so, there's love and there's tenderness, but there's also pain, and, but then there's joy. And so we have to find those webs and flows and those balances. And sometimes that means making a departure from, what should be happening plot-wise in the narrative storytelling. So that's a little bit of the behind the scenes for me. And I see that, like I said, I see that same thing happening in Faren's work as well. Like the decision to just sit on the young women getting their hair, like we're just there, we're just with them, we're just present. Where I think like we're typically told, like what's happening, something's gotta happen, it's gotta move, and we're just there. And that, like that's imagery that's gonna stay with me. And I just felt so, like I needed that, I wanted that, like that was so right.
Agreed.
You talking about the editing and the way you talk about it, in terms of, it's not strategic like a puzzle. It's like I guess maybe I don't know how much your editing mirrors your poetry process, your writing process, but as you're talking about it, I pictured you like looking back like a sculpture, like, okay, we have this, now we have this to balance it out to reach this, you know, emotional
Yeah.
response, but like, you know, the cultivating that happens in your film, because it feels it the deliberation is felt in your film. So at first I was like, oh, this is a neat opener. This was my jam back in the 90s. And I know. And then but the way you it's not incorporated, it's just like it's fully integrated. And I mean, yeah, you talking about narrative as a tool, that explains so much to me in all of the elements and how they coalesce in such a powerful way. So it just wasn't just like, oh, this is neat editing, and oh, he brought that back. It was like, no, this, I mean, it brought a charge and everything. It was just so, I'm not going to say, well, it's just like,
So right.
Yeah, it was right. It was right. I was like, wow, this is, yeah. That's cool. That's what's up. I stand. And listening to you, thank you. You gave me my answers. But yeah, you just saying them sitting there. For me, Liberty Square, but really all of these places. I mean, I could just extend it to my relationship with or how I see Black people. I want unadulterated time with Blackness. I don't want to be, don't interrupt it. I just want, like, so that's why we sit and to let it, whatever manifests in this, just give. I just want time. I just want time to sit with ourselves and be like just steep in ourselves and learn whatever naturally comes from that. I like being surprised on set. I like adapting to what was totally unexpected and unintended, because that's those are the residents. That's the community speaking. That's the community making the film. So so in that way, first I was thinking more logistically, just how, because we are entering a community, the oldest, I already gave y'all the spiel, but so that just lends, that informs how we moved on set, what set was. I just tried to desetify the set as much as I can. So no script soup or monitors. And I was working, this was through a collaboration with a fellowship in LA. So it was just like, it was really concerning to a lot of people on the project, but I just felt it was important to be as inobtrusive as possible for a community that we were entering. Also quiet, because like we're visitors. So that awareness kept crew size down, mostly under 10 people. And yeah, just treating it like, you know, you're visiting somebody's grandmother's house or something. Just don't act wild and leave your bottles. Ain't nobody over here picking up. Yep. So yes, that's how it informed the set.
I'm so sorry. I'm still like, cause you preaching over here, Faren, and I'm like, yo, like, I was just thinking of a few things that you kind of brought up, but like when you said time, like I just want time, like I want to steep, like, you know, I could feel that charge, like I could feel myself welling up, because it's just like, and even just, you know, I went through the film school track and all of these things where it's like I really felt like, so I was often told that, like, you know, my work was not was not it. Like, it was not what we're looking for. It's not narrative. This is just not how it works. This is not how the industry works. And feeling so much insecurity around the way that I felt like was right to tell stories. And you know, Aquasili, who's a dancer, was one of the first people who taught me, just from watching her stuff. Like, she did Bronx Gothic and she just vibrates for 30 minutes, like, and the audience comes in and she's already on stage vibrating, and you have to sit down and she's retooling the way that you're thinking. And I just think about how we use time and reclaim time as Black storytellers, which is something we don't often get, right? It's like the way life and systems and things are set up for, you don't have time, which is why we don't talk about any, you know what I mean? It's like we can't talk about it. We could laugh about it, we could joke about it, but like really sitting and talking about it, and even having the time to put your thoughts together and string it together. I'm thinking about, you know, Suzanne, and like you said, it's like they're getting to talk about these things because somebody is putting, you know, is saying like, we want to hear it. It's worth hearing. You know what I mean? And so what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, just to give Black people time and to utilize that on screen, you know, when we're told often that, like, you know, what happens, we need to get to the next thing and the next point. But we're just gonna sit and watch them play, or we're just gonna sit and watch him breathe, or we're just
do
gonna
nothing, just be
and do nothing and be.
and deal with it.
Right. And you find the humanity in that, you know, like, and what that does for us as audiences, you know what I mean? Just even having that relief and that breath, I think that's so important. And the last thing I'll just point on, that from what you brought up, Faren, is like, again, the way that this industry has a sort of set culture that we are often told, because I had a lot of insecurities around stepping into a director role. I did a lot of screenwriting for a long time and thought that was going to be my path, and stepping into the leadership role of directing seemed really foreign. And but what I learned was that, like, you know, I can determine and set a new culture, right? That's more befitting to how I feel like I want the story to go, or you know, it's like, we're gonna ask audiences to go on this journey of healing. How are we gonna hate each other? How is there gonna be ego and all this stuff on the set? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And I think that that's just another important part, is like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I would love for you guys, because I was catching both that aspect of in both of your responses, and I know we have, you know, Newark has a great independent filmmaking community, and we have a lot of students that are watching, probably at some point. But, you know, I'm curious if you guys could talk a little bit about the resistance within the systems that you did make these films, and, you know, what the kind of breakthrough points were for you in creating the vision that you intended to make.
It's a struggle. Anytime you try to go against, do something new, create something outside of these systems, like, we talking film, but we can talk anything, it's hard. And you will be met with, if not resistance, resistance and maybe just outright, or in the form of skepticism, or just like questioning, like, what is this? What are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do this? But every time that I do, as you were talking, Terrance, I was like, right is right. Right is right. Whatever, like, once your like vision is even just somewhat crystallized, like, you know what, or as you're doing and you're working things out, like, right will show itself. It will, when it arrives, like, that's all I take heed to. And whatever, you can be upset or question, or you know, think this is risky the whole time, but I know what right feels like. Like, it's a feeling. When stuff clicks, and that's just, I mean, that's really what directing, the biggest thing for me with directing is just like filtering out all of the sensory and that could possibly distort what feels like what I try to keep to be like pure and from a specific place. And that doesn't mean like I'm not open or receptive to varying ideas. I very much am, but it's always like, all right, let's take this back to the internal committee and make sure it's right, make sure it feels right. So I have forgotten the question. I'm so happy to see you. But it felt right. It felt like I answered it, even though I don't remember what it was.
What were you gonna say, LeRon?
No, I was just really interested because, of course, you have to get people on board, right? And as you were saying, Terrance, when you watch Faren's film, it felt like a documentary, which is something that I felt that was beautiful about it. So when it starts off, we see the subculture, and I love subculture. And did you have that on a page? Was that something that was on the page?
Oh, thanks. I forgot about that. That's the thing too. Like, I don't intend to trick people. I forget. I'm like, oh yeah, this is my process. It's whatever goes. And I forgot to tell my producers that. So they showed up, LA Sparkly producers. I don't know who's watching this. It's fine. To Miami. Went to Liberty Square. First, they were just like, oh my gosh. They tried to get us to go to another project housing site, like half a mile in a different city, Little Haiti, because it looked better. And I was like, what? Do y'all understand the purpose of this? To document this place? But I mean, that's a challenge too, just like something that I've realized over the years, like, it would be better to preemptively, but you know, I was working out these things. I did not know that Liberty was going to be as, you know, have these like blurred lines. I wrote the script. I knew that I wasn't going to use any of the dialogue that I had written. And I think I communicated that, maybe, I don't know, but.
It's been a while.
It's been 2 years since we made this. But again, in terms of right, there was a lot of resistance leading up to, and I guess I understand your question. You're saying like, how do you get people on board with them? I guess my answer is you don't tell them everything. I don't know. But once they got on set, it worked out. They felt what was right. Like the last scene of the film, it was about 5 of us in the room. It was palpable. Yes, when moments are unbroken and undeterred, for me, that's why I like feel so strongly about duration, because it's like you get to see the start and the end of something, and there's something about an enduring process. Like, it's just, things happen. You get to witness it for yourself. You're not being told through like the camera going this way and it's just you. Yeah, it's just an undeterred moment.
I love it. Can I hop in as well? Sorry, I'm looking at the time. I know y'all wanted to keep it short, but I was like, I always, my hardest thing with film school for the film students who are watching was I felt like I applied to be there, and then I felt like they forgot who they accepted. You know what I mean? I'm like, did y'all read the application? Like, because I haven't changed. I'm the same person. Like, these are the things I'm interested in, and this is how I'm interested in doing them. Community is always first, and like over the film sometimes. Sometimes people will do anything for a shot or for a take, and I'm like, nah, if he's cold, like we put the blanket over him, and we got what we got, right? You know what I mean? Like, let's move on. But another thing I'll liken it to is just like, in the story of David with Goliath, and the king gives him all this armor that he puts on, and he's like, nah, I'm about to go take my three little, things or whatever, and knock him out that way. I remember our first day of shooting Ship was one of the most chaotic days. As I mentioned, it was the first time I was doing a narrative short film, and so it was, in my mind, it's like, because you go in with this sometimes this mindset of lack, like, oh, like there's a way that it's done, and I gotta. So I had the script supervisor and the cameras and all the things that, again, school are giving you. They're like, hey, take all this stuff, and so all that was on set with me, and it was not feeling right. I was like, yo, I feel like I haven't had a second with my actors. You know, we're doing one of the hardest scenes on the first day, and there's so many people on set. I never have that many people on set. Similar, like it's usually like just 5 of us, we making it happen. I was like, I never have this many people on set, monitors, lights. I was like, what is this? And at some point, you know, everybody's running around and everything is happening. And I said, wait. Like, I took a second, sat everybody down, which is like, again, like, you know, you're on the day, time is money, all that stuff. We sat everybody down, we pulled out the scripts and we read the scene together. And I just needed a beat. Like I just needed a second to reset. And then that night I went home and I was so tired, I was so exhausted. And my mentor, my producer, Karen Rose Brewing, who literally helped me get that film done. She's another Florida woman, was not to be played with. But, you know, she said, don't let these people convince you don't know how to make a film, that you don't know how to tell this story. And the next day I told a lot of people to stay home and cut down the set number significantly. And that was the night we did a lot of the funeral stuff. And it just was a completely different feeling. It was like, I felt so much more, you know, with everybody. And after that, we started praying in the mornings before we started checking in, like we would go around, everybody say who they are. And I'm just like, nah, like, you know, there's a way that you can do this and make this work that is not that other way. And there was resistance from some of my my classmates from NYU, because I also, you know, I like to work with my community. So I love to work with people who I went to school with back at Morehouse, and who might not have the same amount of film expertise and knowledge and set but I love bringing them in and working with them, and we just work it out. We talk it through. Like, I don't mind moving an apple box, you know what I mean? Whereas for some people, it's like the director doesn't touch an apple box. I'm like, and so, you know, just different kind of ways of being and maneuvering that I think speak to why we're doing this in the first place, and the conversations that we want to have from this. You know what I mean? It's not about having an award in my hand at the end of the day. It's like, this was made because real lives are affected by these things. And yeah, whatever, it might sound pretentious, but it's like, it's just too much money. It's too much money. It's too much time. It's too much energy to be out here not saying anything, you know what I mean? And then to be hating everybody by the end of the day. Like, that's not it for me.
Sure. So we're reaching that time. I don't know if anybody has questions that are in the chat. You got 1 minute to ask them. And in the meantime, I guess that I'm going to promote the Newarkive and where we are. We are on Facebook under Newarkive, which is spelled Newarkive, and we are on Instagram at Newarkive, same spelling, Newarkive. And check us out. And if you're from Newark and you want to share your stories, we invite you to it. And Yvonne, if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, I have another question. And just while we're kind of waiting for maybe some possible questions from the audience, you know, I think that, first of all, my head's about to fall off by like nodding so hard. This is like the best. This is the best conversation. Okay, so we'll get to. I see one question just pop up, and maybe Stephen, can you answer that question? How do we see these films? They sound incredible. They are on. You have to register for the event. Stephen, maybe you can provide a link. Stephen Highland from the Newark Museum, who's with us tonight. Maybe you can provide a link for folks, just to make sure that they register. Thanks. Yeah, you know, I think LeRon and I have discussed this, you know, during this time, past 7 months or so. I think that, you know, we've all probably been engaged and asked about how these times are affecting our work and our outlook. And, you know, I think it's an interesting question for those of us who have practices that we feel like have always been centered, always been community centered, and always been, you know, focused on liberation, some aspect of liberation. So I'm just curious for the two of you, just what you've necessarily been reckoning with during this time period, and you know, how it's informing how you view your own practice.
I'll answer just quickly because I have thought about this. After Hyphen Chip, I didn't want to make movies anymore. I was sort of done, and I found myself craving so much more light. Like, I was like asking myself, what's the point of all this? But I found myself craving light and color, and that drew me to coming of age stories, and specifically queer coming of age stories with young Black men and Black boys at play. It inspired the next work that I'm doing now. But I just found that, again, going back to what I was saying about how filmmaking engages our imaginations, it also, in some way, shape, or form informs our futures. And it's hard to think about what your future can be and will be when you're always just constantly seeing premature death. And so, this attraction to coming of age stories just became a new fascination for me as a storyteller, to be able to tell stories of, those moments, those intimate moments that we don't often get to see, and inspire in some way, shape, or form futurity in a way that actually, again, heals, might get to healing.
The thought that I had the other day, and it wasn't a neat thought, and it was like I was in bed, so it wasn't fully crystallized at all. But I was just thinking, like, oh, what's the reality? What does it look like when, because we are so good at using art to process our trauma, and I'm like, when will the day come, if it will come? I mean, that's needed, right? But that was just what I was wondering. Just like, well, is this what art's relationship will always be to me? Will it always be about processing trauma, or I guess there's like an idyllic wish that I have of, it's not a wish, but just it is a thought of, well, that was the question. What are the conditions that will render this tool that we have grown so adept at, because we got so much shit to process? When will it become less significant? I don't know, but that. Because we're always doing it. I'm like, I want it to not be as much of a need. That's all is what I was thinking. But we're sentient beings. We feel, we're highly empathic. I can tell you are, Terrance, from your work. This stuff affects us, and you be who you are, and you let it affect you, and do what it needs to do so that you continue processing the trauma for good use, for whatever you feel your use is, whatever you have identified your purpose for that film is.
I see some questions in the chat. I didn't know if should I chat back, or should I just, I can bang them out real quick too.
Yeah. Go ahead, shout them out. And
the funding of it all, Hyphen Chip, I didn't want to crowdfund. I'd crowdfunded for the 2 films before it, and I wanted to, again, I just wanted to give my family's pockets a rest. And so I went in kind of really ignorant, not having enough money. By the time we finished shooting, I actually owed a lot. And this is where Karen Rose comes back in again, that mentor, and another producer, Khalid, came on board and helped me find and target some individual donors who essentially helped to contribute to make the film. So a community effort. As to what I'm working on next, it was a previously live action, but because of COVID, we redeveloped it as an animated short film, queer coming of age, called Pretty. And again, just spending time with young Black boys at play, with my friend who wrote the original IP off which the short is based, Keith F. Miller Jr. He has a quote that says, "When Black boys play, they heal," and that became the sort of engine for the storytelling for the short. So I'm super excited and passionate about that. And then, do you want to give up sometimes? Yes, I definitely want to give up, but what I found is making films with like the right community, like having gone through, you know, different films and seeing the people who I want on my team, and then like making sure they're with me on the next one. I found it opens, like it allows me to not stress, and it allows me to, it's just been such an easier process. Making pretty is vastly different from making hyphenship, and I want to keep moving in that work. So if I can keep doing it like this, yes.
I hope you can.
Definitely something I'm exploring is how our art forms serve as therapy. And you know, just like you said, when Black boys play, they heal. And Faren, we see it in your film, whether they realize it or not, these subcultures, they just play this role. You know, they just do it. I don't know why they do it. It just becomes part of their culture. And I feel like that's also a part of healing in a lot of ways. So Yvonne, you have anything else to add?
I just want to say the name Camille Billups, the filmmaker of Suzanne. I think she's definitely a source of inspiration for me and for this effort, this Newarkive effort, as far as, you know, part of her legacy is, of course, the fierce filmmaking that she did, but also the creation of an archive of Black artistry that we can all still take advantage of to this day, that she made available to us. So with that, I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you, Terrance and Faren. This was our first film series event, and I don't think it could have been a better conversation. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Ron and Yvonne. I love it. I love that y'all are doing this together, and that y'all making this space possible.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. And again, the films, if you missed it, they are available until Sunday. Please, I think the link is in the chat, and on Facebook, the link might be there. Please register today and watch these incredible films. And join us next week, Thursday, October 1st at 7 p.m. for another panel where we'll be discussing different films with different filmmakers. And to watch those films, please sign up for the panel on Eventbrite. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Yo, Faren, we're going to be talking.
I am so glad this is mutual. Thank you.
Of course. Talk to y'all later.